I think you probably don't have to do much more else for the rest of your married life. I mean, I think that pretty much tops it. What do you reckon, guys?
Set the bar pretty high for Valentine's Day in the future.
Yep. Welcome to Media Watch. I'm Jonathan Holmes. It was the classic St Valentine's Day story. The arrival in Sydney Harbour of the Queen Mary 2 flaunting a giant proposal on her superstructure made the news last Tuesday on almost every network in almost every market in Australia.
Stefan's proposal was off the romance Richter scale. His girlfriend didn't suspect a thing.
I said yes.
Leaving his blindfolded beauty speechless.
Did you say yes? Yes, I yes.
It took a little while to sink in, but the answer was what he'd been hoping for.
Jess said yes. A very, very beautiful start to Valentine's Day for Stefan and Jess.
It was certainly a beauty of a PR stunt by Cunard, and the TV networks happily went along as they so often do.
Stefan Lieben walked his girlfriend.
At least the ABC told its viewers in a brief super that the crucial footage had been supplied by Cunard. That's more than anyone else did, as far as we can tell, though Stefan Lieben himself was pretty open on Seven's Sunrise.
Yeah, I had a friend who works for this company, and because I was planning to propose to Jess quite a while ago, and this opportunity arose.
Well, how did the opportunity arise? This is Stefan's friend, Christine O'Malley, who was holding their baby while Stefan proposed to Jess.
The whole of Sydney's wondering who you are.
No.
Yeah.
O'Malley works for Sydney PR company MG Media. And as Cunard's owners told Media Watch,
we decided in November last year to offer a couple the opportunity to ask the big question on a grand scale, and worked with our long-standing PR agency, MG Media, to find someone interested in making their proposal a moment to remember.
Of course, it all came as a surprise to Jess McGarity. But even Stefan, it seems, was surprised that Cunard had arranged for his special moment to be witnessed by 2 photographers and 2 video crews, complete with microphones.
Oh, photos. I hate photos.
You hate photos?
Yes.
Good on you.
Hi.
Hello.
In the raw footage supplied to the ABC and others, Jess McGarity's discomfort is painfully obvious. And the scene everyone used, with Stefan on one knee, was clearly an afterthought, dreamt up for the snappers.
Here we go, guys. Big, big smiles. Jess, big, big smiles. Where's that smile, Jess? I'm going to come and tickle you. I know you hate photos.
Jess McGarity told Media Watch that Stefan had been taken aback.
He expected a lot more privacy, especially at the beginning.
But of the major networks, only 10 News hinted that it hadn't been the happiest of St Valentine's Day stories.
I've said to him, listen, I don't consider it a proper proposal yet. When we, in private.
The most honest treatment that we found was in this video story on the Daily Telegraph's website.
It was really different to the way he thought it was going to go. He thought he was going to get a moment to say what he wanted to say to me privately, and that didn't happen, and he's a little bit disappointed about that.
I doubt if Cunard is disappointed. Combined with the lavish coverage of the ship's arrival on Seven's Sunrise...
Huge in size, astonishingly large. In fact, she's just, $1 billion worth of brilliance.
The Love Boat stunt garnered massive publicity for the Queen Mary 2. We asked media strategist Steve Allen to put a value on Seven's coverage.
Pure commercial airtime value for this package of coverage is worth around $450,000. This is editorial, so it is worth around 3 times more.
All up, around $1.5 million worth of free publicity on one network alone. At least Sunrise didn't call it news. Meanwhile, this is what the Daily Telegraph calls news week after week.
Soft touch. Exclusive.
Andrew Clennell. The Attorney-General has gone soft on crime, ordering the Law Reform Commission to find ways of keeping criminals out of the state's bulging jails.
Yes, it's that wearyingly familiar phenomenon, the tabloid law and order beat-up. For nearly a month now, New South Wales's Attorney-General has been targeted by the Telegraph. Not so long ago, it was dishing out the same treatment to Labor.
Get out of jail free.
Flooding suburban streets with violent offenders is the latest scheme to deal with the state's overflowing jails.
In fact, the Keneally Labour government was merely looking for substitutes for the failed policy of weekend detention. And the new policy was supported by the then Shadow Attorney General, Greg Smith.
Rehabilitation programs can't be run properly in prison. They're much more effective when done outside.
Traditionally, state oppositions, regardless of party, curry favour with the voters and the tabloid press by claiming that the government's mollycoddling criminals. For example, the Herald Sun and the Liberal opposition played the law and order game for all it was worth in the run-up to the Victorian state election. But in New South Wales last year, Greg Smith, a former state prosecutor with genuine expertise on crime and punishment, wouldn't play. As The Australian reported during the state election campaign last March,
the Libs talk about sobering up centres, a presumption in favour of bail, genuine rehabilitation for criminals and the perils of tougher sentencing. It's hard for the shock jocks to whip up outrage when they can't find politicians to agree with them.
Well, now the Libs are in government. Mr Smith is Attorney General and he's doing what he always said he would do, although not according to the Daily Telegraph.
How Greg Smith went from Rambo to marshmallow.
That story and an editorial the previous day cherry-picked the occasional hardline quote by Smith to make it look as though his push for alternatives to prison for less serious offenders represents a complete change of heart. It doesn't. Arguably, it's Labour that has changed its tune.
Criminal gangs are running riot in southwest Sydney, and the government's response is to reduce jail sentences. Opposition leader John Robertson said.
Neither side wants to reduce sentences for serious crimes. But the Labour opposition saw the spate of drive-by shootings plaguing southwest Sydney as an opportunity to attack a policy goal it previously supported. The government's position itself isn't new. The telly's soft touch story was mainly based on this.
Media release, 23rd of September 2011. Sentencing laws to be reviewed.
It was 4 months old. So whose idea was it to do the story in January? Andrew Clennell's? Well, no. As he told his mate Ray Hadley on 2GB, the Sentencing Council had issued a discussion paper that week.
And look, yeah, the opposition came to me and said, look, we want to call for a freeze on this. We don't think this is an appropriate time for this sort of review. I mean, look what's happening on the streets of Western and South-Western Sydney.
The opposition came to him. And a week later, Clennell was at it again.
Exclusive. Gays minorities get bail, but the rest go straight to jail.
They love their monopoly at the telly. But this story is based on a draft Law Reform Commission report. 300 pages long, hasn't been finalised, hasn't officially gone to the minister. Yet, Clennell reports,
in a decision which has angered police, the presumption against bail for serious offences would also be removed under the proposals.
Decision? What decision? We asked the telly. It replied,
the outcomes of the draft Law Reform Commission report.
Pure, unadulterated piffle. There haven't been any outcomes. There isn't yet even a finished report. Mind you, in going for Smith, the telly has found itself lonelier than usual. The shock jocks who can normally be relied on to leap on any soft-on-crime story in the Telegraph mostly haven't obliged. But 2GB's Ray Hadley has been only too happy to support the telly and to bash the Attorney General.
This bloke is a raving lunatic, the Attorney General. As I've said many times, this is a coalition Attorney General who's behaving like he's a card-carrying member of the extreme left of the Labor Party.
A raving lunatic. In a recent speech, the new Chief Justice of New South Wales, Tom Bathurst, deplored the fact that
community trust in the criminal justice system is eroding. Much of this distrust is fuelled by misinformation that is propagated by sections of the media who prefer to inflame rather than inform.
Who could he have meant? And now to someone who copped a really long sentence for a genuinely serious crime.
Good evening. Convicted wife killer Andrew Kalasic is a free man tonight after spending the last 25 years in jail.
The contract killing of his wife in 1986, instigated and paid for by wealthy hotelier Andrew Kalasic, was a celebrated case that made headlines nationwide. No wonder his release from Sydney's Silverwater prison brought the media out in force.
Have you got anything to say? Get out of your hair. Anything to say?
No, he didn't. And he had nothing much to say either when he arrived at his sister's home in the beachside suburb of Manly an hour later.
How do you feel?
I feel great.
And yet the media pack stayed outside his home all that day and pursued him when he ventured out the next. Nine's Damien Ryan produced the most idiotic story.
They stopped once to buy water before a spot of grocery shopping.
Though he must have been sorely tried, Andrew Kalesic was scrupulously polite to his pursuers. In fact, when we called him last week, he said the thing that really annoyed him was this headline in the Manly Daily.
Hug from a killer. Cherise Chang. As Andrew Kalesic walked along the path to the side entrance of his new Manly home yesterday, I asked him whether he still maintained his innocence. To my surprise, he stopped and pulled me closer.
Andrew Kalesic told Media Watch,
"That headline is a total fabrication. I did not touch that woman. Absolutely not."
Well, 25 years ago, the courts found that Mr. Kalesic was a murderer and a liar. But in this little matter, we can prove he's telling the truth. Here's the footage from 9 News' story that first day, slowed down. That's Cherise Chang in the foreground. And this tiny gesture by Kalesic is the so-called hug. As you can see, he didn't touch her. Manly Daily editor Luke McElveen blithely told Media Watch that according to Ms Chang,
Mr. Kalesic had trouble hearing her and put his arm around her back to usher her closer. I described this in the headline as a hug, but if, as you say, there was no touching, I accept a better word could have been used.
Probably could, Luke. Probably could. And lastly tonight, a cautionary tale. Being a political numbers man isn't as easy as it looks. The Weekend Australian tried it on Saturday with a fancy graphic assigning every member of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Caucus to one of 3 columns.
Gillard supporters, 46. Rudd supporters, 36. Undecided, 21.
Well, actually, quite often to more than one. We counted the names in each column and we got different totals.
Gillard supporters, 52. Rudd supporters, 43. Undecided, 21.
Somehow a caucus of 103 had grown to 116. It turns out that 3 names from the undecided column are also to be found in the Gillard column. 5 undecideds also appear in the Rudd supporters column. And no fewer than 5 MPs appeared in both the Gillard column and the Rudd column. This morning, the Oz published a correction tucked away at the bottom of page 2 and a new graphic with substantially different numbers on page 4. Just part of the general madness. More on that, perhaps, next week. Until then, good night.